Hi, thanks for watching. Okay, in this video, I'd like to talk even more about Lori Vallow Daybell because she has so many facets and she sort of fits in between the cracks. She's sort of a little bit criminal, a little bit mentally ill. There's parts of her that are very dominant, almost to the point of being, like a super escalator, basically. Um, and I said in the last video that I didn't really see her as a stone cold killer. Okay. And it's funny because everything I say, I sort of want to take back like 30%, not 100%, because I think Lori is a very complex person. I don't think she's an absolute stone cold killer. I don't think she's like somebody who'd go hunting random people just for the joy of killing. I don't think she's, just a pure murderer. But I want to take back like maybe 20% of that or put like an asterisk on that because I think there is something about her that is almost on the spectrum of being a killer. Okay. And maybe it would be helpful to talk about it in terms of being a destroyer, a destroyer. Okay. And I guess, every time I look at true crime, I really want to try to see it in ways that we can all learn. Okay, those of us like me who've had a cluster B diagnosis, or other people who just have issues with anger management, or just behavior issues, or just discipline. What can we learn? Because these are extreme cases, but they have a lot to teach us. Okay, and so I guess I want to look today at. Take a little seriously the testimony of Audrey Barattiero. Okay, Barattiero, whatever. This was a person who was loosely involved in I guess, the Church of the Firstborn, or this very small group that Chad Daybell had formed. I guess of like loyal minions. I guess people who sort of looked at Chad Daybell as being like a prophet, and I guess Daybell had some fondness for Audrey, and she was a very loyal, very dedicated sort of member of this group to some extent. And she really shared a lot of the beliefs about the end of the world. I think she even relocated to Missouri because I think she felt that Missouri was going to be an important location for, I think, the second coming of Jesus Christ. Okay. So we're talking about somebody who, along with the rest, really did believe certain things, about the end of the world. Had very fundamental, honest, earnest beliefs about, some of the more problematic, kind of apocalyptic aspects of Mormon theology. The idea that the world really is ending, and she took it very seriously, very literally. And I assume she still believes a lot of these things. Okay. So she testified at Lori's trial, and I have this weird feeling with all the women from that group for some reason. Whenever I hear Melanie Gibb or I hear Zulema, I feel like they're so careful when they talk about what happened in their group that they're trying to like sort of design their testimony to make themselves not look so bad. Okay, so I always feel this kind of uneasy feeling like, how much should I believe? Because I feel like they're sort of managing how they share the truth, basically. And I just don't feel like it's just an unfiltered, honest, telling of what really happened. So I guess I'm sort of conditioned not to know whether I really believe much of what Audrey says. And yet, on the other hand, I think, it might be useful to just assume for the sake of argument, okay, that maybe, let's say 90% of what she said was true. Probably maybe only 85% or maybe 80% is actually true. But in this case, just for the sake of argument, here I'm not making a definitive analysis. I just think sometimes it's important to take what people say seriously, just to see if what they said was true. Okay, if what they said were true, then what would that mean in light of the rest of what we know about Lori in terms of forming an assessment of what kind of person she is? How much is she really a killer? How much is she really just a crazy person? How much is she someone who's just lost or just out of control? Just to have just a better sense of who Lori is. Okay, because I think Lori's a very complex person. Okay, so in this video, I just want to sort of assume for the sake of this video. Okay, so I'm not hanging my hat on this. I'm not going to the bank on this, but just for the sake of this video, assume, let's say 95% of what Audrey Barattiero said, let's just assume about 90% was true. Okay, and what would that mean in light of what we already know about Lori? Okay, so Basically, in the most problematic part of the testimony of Audrey Barattiero, okay, was basically that she had apparently visited Lori's house, okay, and was actually spending time with Lori um, at around the time when at least one or two people had already been killed. Okay, so it was at a time when these people were already way off in their delusions and actually actively committing serious crimes. Okay, you'll please forgive me if I don't remember exactly the timing. Okay, but I'm going to assume, and if my timing's off by a couple of weeks, but I'm going to assume that Audrey was at Lori's house at least around the time or close to the time when they either were about to kill the children or had already killed one or both of the children. Okay, so um, the idea was that I guess Lori wasn't in a very good mood, and I guess Audrey had said something to her that Lori just kind of didn't like, And I think Lori probably had a little jealousy with Audrey because maybe she was younger. Let's be honest, she's younger, and I think maybe Chad had maybe, let's just say, a soft spot for Audrey. You know, I don't know that she's the most attractive person in the world, but let's just assume that she, was young and not ugly, let's say, for the standards of that group. And maybe Lori wasn't just gushing with 100% affection for Audrey. Okay. But something she said provoked Lori, and Lori just kind of chastised Audrey for coming across as so innocent and sort of having this sort of aura of innocence about her. And Lori's just like, give me a break, life isn't really like that. Life isn't all rainbows and whatever. And if you're not careful, and I'm not sure what, I think Audrey might have been suggesting that she would even, I think there was even suggestion of like letting some information out to the authorities. I'm not sure exactly. I'm going to have to go back, but let's just say you guys know more than I do about exactly the context. But basically, Lori was really actually upset, very upset at Audrey, and first criticized how innocent, like her innocent appearance and her innocent sort of like aura, basically, because Audrey does come across as very vulnerable and innocent. Okay, so Lori first kind of chastised her for having kind of this innocent sort of, very kind of, let's say she comes across as being a very like innocent sort of, I can't think of a better word, but just you come across as being a very meek and innocent person. And Lori's basically saying, if I wanted to, I could kill you and chop you into little pieces or something like that. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and assume that probably is a little bit of an exaggeration, because I'm assuming for a person like Audrey, hearing anything even close to that probably just blew her top. And I'm going to assume that in let's say the trauma of receiving that kind of verbal attack, that probably there's room for a little distortion that's not even intended to be an exaggeration. Let's just say, I'm going to assume that Audrey is trying to be honest, but that there may be just a tad bit of distortion. But let's just say that even if 75% of that is true, let's just be charitable. Basically, Lori had basically let Audrey know that, she was capable, or she was trying to make Audrey think that she was capable of doing really dastardly things, up to and including maybe killing a person and maybe chopping them into little pieces. How much of that is exaggerated? But let's just say it was in the neighborhood of Lori basically saying, I could do some terrible things. Okay, so let's just assume that's true. Let's not, I'm not saying I know that's true, but let's just assume that's true. So what does that tell me about Lori, in light of me saying in another video that I didn't think she was a stone cold killer? Okay, so taking into account this testimony by Audrey, and just kind of assuming it's true for the sake of argument, basically, how am I going to piece that together? If Lori really did act that way, how am I going to piece that together with what we already know about Lori's background? Okay, the most important thing that I know about Lori's background is that she is a super escalator. Okay, she's a super escalator. I don't know if in the heart of hearts, I don't know if she's a killer. I don't know that, because to me, a killer is somebody who's even willing to personally, stab a person. And there are women, and this does happen, women who actually stab people, women who actually poison people. Now, I know there's some controversy about whether Lori may have put drugs, drugged things, and maybe drugged Charles or talked about drugging him. So she may be close to the territory of being a poisoning, killer. But I don't know. I don't know that Lori. We'll never know really if she's the type of person capable of directly stabbing a person. Okay, so what I understand she's capable of killing, but I think in terms of forming a psychological portrait of Lori, what I get as consistent all the way is that she is kind of a destroyer of people. Okay, so to say that she's a destroyer, that kind of makes sense. And basically it's not like she's like a person who likes to hunt like random people, like random innocent people, just for the joy of hunting them. It is always in response to when she's being challenged by somebody, okay, or when she's in an intimate situation where she feels she has an enemy close to her. And I guess in Lori's case that came with ex-husbands, with Charles, and then Ryan, I can't remember his first name, but the Ryan husband, the father of Tylee. Basically, where she would get into, like, say, a domestic conflict, maybe up to the point of needing like family court, some kind of divorce situation or custody situation, and she would approach that litigation sort of with the mindset of just destroying that person. Okay. And now this is something I think we can all relate to, okay, and so on some level, very rarely, even if we have destroyer characteristics, any of us, okay, very rarely will be in a situation where we actually truly destroy a person, okay. A lot of times in our lives, the kind of destruction that gets sort of expressed, in just regular human intercourse, are things like family court. How many times when a woman goes into family court, or a man or a woman or whatever, and you get into these custody battles, how many times do people actually go into it with the motives of totally destroying the other person? I mean, it's an honest question. I think litigation is actually a place where a lot of people kind of get to take away their, the appearance of being, sort of a moderate person. And it's like, we're just going to beat the crap out of that person. Like, and I say that informally, like, when you're in litigation, like, we're going to sue the shit out of him. And it's basically, you don't really think, like, when somebody is sued, okay, if they're not a multi-millionaire, okay, even if they're a regular millionaire, like, say, if you have a net worth of $2 million, you could be completely destroyed by a lawsuit. Okay, look at what Johnny Depp did to Amber Heard. Okay, now you can think Amber Heard's a bad person. Okay, but she was destroyed. I mean, just the effect of being sued at a multi-million-dollar level, you can just be completely destroyed. And Amber Heard was a millionaire prior to the lawsuit with Johnny. I mean, not a heavy-duty millionaire, but she, whatever. So, just in regular life, you could just be a guy who makes, $10,000 a month or whatever, just some, upper middle class. You could be completely, really, really, disabled by a heavy duty lawsuit in family court or in civil court, So a lot of times we don't think about it because you go to your lawyer and it's like, yeah, we're going to sue the shit out of him. And it's just sort of seems like a game, but what you're really doing, you can really destroy somebody, So I think all of us should think, a lot of times there are little areas in life where we're sort of all allowed to sort of take our shirts off and sort of roll our sleeves up or whatever and just kind of just beat the crap out of somebody. There's little areas where we're allowed to do that, like in litigation, or maybe in sports. Let's say sports, some people get into sports and you really see who they really are, And I think Lori, for whatever reason, when we look at her pattern with family court litigation, okay, and the way she would get fixated on an enemy and just never let go of trying to destroy that person. Okay. And then even, let's just be honest, by the time she got to Charles, she was already having a full blown nervous breakdown. I think she was fully broken as a person. I think by the time Charles was dead, I think Lori was kind of a fragmented person. I don't think she had her compos mentis, let's just say. She may not have been schizophrenic, but if I were a doctor, I would say I can't reasonably say in good conscience that Lori was actually compos mentis. She may have acted sort of compos mentis. She may have been able to put on a show, when she's being interrogated by police, sort of acting like she sort of got it together. Maybe she's crafty. Maybe she's capable of designing lies, and she's sort of, just a crafty, sort of manipulative person. But at the heart of hearts, there was something broken inside Lori. I mean, despite all the conniving and all the dishonesty, I think that by the time Charles was murdered, I think she had really crossed the border, and she didn't have full integrity. Okay. And, I'm always going to talk about this. Every time I talk about people who commit crimes, I want us to be honest about, having full, let's say having full or diminished capacity. It's sort of like the spectrum of being, like, say, sober or relatively intoxicated or very intoxicated, these like levels. And whenever I look at like people who have personality disorders, I'm always looking at some kind of agitation. It's like an agitation. It's like they say in Scientology, they always say the word interbulation, agitation and turbulation, but it's like a place where there's no peacefulness. There's kind of like an agitated, disturbed part of the self, And I think one of the best models for looking at this is ADD. When you see people with ADHD, that kind of sped up, very sped up. And it's funny, they say attention deficit, but what you really notice with people who have ADHD is they're very fast. It's like they're on speed, And so whenever I look at these situations, where a person is really behaving, like really acting out, I always try to be honest about the level of diminished capacity. And I'm not saying diminished capacity, like, say, in a legal sense. Okay. I'm saying diminished capacity just in common sense, in terms of common sense, that every time I run into these cases where you're dealing with like somebody who's a little bit psychopathic or a little bit sociopathic, or, just kind of like really acting out, like the Corey Richards, let's say, I look at these people and I can see the sped upness. And someone myself, who I have also had a cluster B diagnosis, I know in myself, there's sometimes too much speed than should be there, and why it is, we'll never know. I mean, people say they know why. I guarantee you, to get to the bottom of these things, I think it's just a fact that some people have a lot of speed going on, and it's sort of like you could say it's almost like a disturbance. It's like a part of us that's disturbed. And so basically, when I look at Lori, I ask myself honestly, a person, even a person who's just average, not even an exceptional person, I think most people have deep down in their core center, I think there is, for most people, a buffer zone, okay, of relatively undisturbed reflection. Okay, relatively, just a little buffer zone where there's room to have undisturbed reflection. Okay, just a little bit, not a lot. I'm not saying an overabundance. I'm just saying most people have just that little buffer. Okay. And I'm thinking that when I look at people like Corey Richards, Lori Daybell, whatever, I see, and just knowing from my own experience, I think there are people who deep down where they should have that buffer, where they can have just a little bit of undisturbed reflection. Okay. What I see is where there should be that, I don't see the buffer at all. I just see disturbed mental activity where you don't get the opportunity, even the tiniest opportunity, to have just a little more reflection. Okay. To have sort of undisturbed consideration of what's happening. It's like, you just speed things up just a little bit and you take away that undisturbed quality. Okay. So that if you're someone who doesn't have undisturbed space, okay, you can reflect. Okay. It's just that you're reflecting in the middle of a noise storm. Okay. And so maybe 9 times out of 10 you can reflect. Okay. But that 1 time out of 10, you're not going to reflect fully. Okay. Or you're going to get carried away. Okay. And obviously once you get carried away, the horses are out of the gate. I mean, it's like, whatever. And I understand that. Like, there's that thing in psychology, once you let the horses out of the gate, the train's already rolling and, whatever. But when I look at people like Lori, I can see the speed. I can see the agitation. I can see that it's not undisturbed. It's like disturbed inside of her, just in the way she talks, And so by the time Charles came around, okay, I mean, look, Lori already had the tendency to escalate. Okay. But by the time Charles came around, it just seems to me that she had sort of abandoned the reflective part of herself. It was abandoned. It was just like the horses were out of the gate, and basically, she was on the campaign, and it's like that's a sad thing, because to me, I see that as a diminished sobriety. I think her sobriety just kind of checked out, and I'm not going to say that qualifies for a legal defense of diminished capacity, but in my common sense, I would know, being around Lori, not to provoke her, because I can tell she doesn't have all cylinders working for her. I can tell she's missing a few balls, she's missing, there's a few screws loose, you know what I mean? So I just know for myself, if I was around a person like that, and I think her family was very smart, they also knew better than to provoke her too much, because you can tell that's not a person who's got all of their wherewithal, um, but as far as like once the horses are out of the gate, okay, and once she actually got to where she was ready to, like, really try to kill Charles, and I think she did try to kill Charles, okay, I think she orchestrated his killing, okay, but do I see that as the activities of a killer, like a stone cold killer? I think I see it in the context of a destroyer. Okay, I think I see it in the context of a destroyer, not so much a pure killer. Okay, if she was a pure killer, I think she would have lusted and kind of craved the opportunity to stab him personally, you know, and then also claim self-defense, right? I mean, she could manipulate still, but I think she preferred to have Alex do it and just sort of orchestrate it, because I think what she was really trying to do, she wasn't craving like penetrating his body and, like, separating his tissues and just carving him. I think what she was really craving was just to destroy him. Okay. Just to destroy him. Okay. And I think that's consistent with Lori's escalatory tendency. She's a super escalator. Okay. And basically that just means she's a super competitor. So that when she is in a situation where she perceives an enemy, okay, basically her instinct, and I think it's just an instinct, she just goes overboard to destroy and win and prevail, basically. So I see that. Um, and so when I hear her, sort of threatening Audrey, what I hear is not that she's craving to take her body parts and put them into bags. That part, I think, I mean, she may have said that, sure, or she may have said 80% of that. But I think what's really going on is Lori's kind of facing what she feels as somebody who's challenging her. Okay. And basically it's kind of like letting her know that I will stop at nothing to destroy you, is basically the way I interpret that. Okay. So I think, what can we all learn from that? I continue to believe, okay, that just because you have a destroyer in yourself, okay, because a lot of us do have that. Okay. A lot of us are super competitors. A lot of us, when provoked, we are going to win all the way. Okay. Like super escalators, that does exist in the world, but what makes the difference between somebody who just has that as part of them and somebody who could actually hurt people? Okay. Well, again, I think it is, in part, I think it is how disturbed we are on the inside. I think all of us have to check in, and all of us have to ask ourselves, do we have really a buffer zone? Do we have a buffer zone inside where we really have the opportunity for undisturbed reflection? Okay. To reflect in the midst of a noise storm, I mean, you can reflect in a noise storm, but it's not really the best reflection. Do all of us have, a sufficient buffer zone where we can really calmly reflect on what we're doing? And I think most of us, the answer is not as much as we'd like to. Okay. And so in that sense, we can relate to Lori. And if those of us who do have a destroyer as part of us, one of the most important things in life, it's better to accept and suffer things that are embarrassing about yourself. Okay. It's better to suffer the embarrassment rather than to be so agitated by the fact that you have this weird thing in you, that you end up making a satellite of it through dissociation, and it becomes like a satellite thing that you can't manage. You see what I mean? So if you have, let's say, something really embarrassing, like, you have some weird sexual stuff, or you got some weird thing where sometimes you really fantasize about hurting people or whatever, it's better just to fully accept it and feel like shit about it. Okay. And feel just like shit and suffer all the way. It can hurt your soul, but it's better just to feel like shit than to dissociate it and let it turn into a satellite where it could cause more trouble. Okay. So that's the lesson I have to learn from that. And also, if it causes a lot of pain for us to admit that we have these very unappetizing things in ourselves, things like maybe there's a part of me that's a destroyer, or maybe even a part of me that could kill or could hurt people, whatever, it's better just to fully embrace it, and not just fully embrace it, but to feel as bad as you will feel. Okay. And not to deny any of the bad. It's better just to get sick with feeling bad about it, but to have it inside yourself and not thrown out as a satellite. Because in my opinion, I think part of Lori's problem, coming from the sunshiny Mormon culture, okay, it's so sunshiny, it's so positive and so innocent and so prim and proper. I think that Lori probably would have felt just too much shame to really accept and fully embrace some of the more vicious parts of herself. Okay, she didn't even have the step zero to even begin to consider and to take in, and really meditate on some of the things about her that really were not very nice. Okay. And I think that, part of that's the Mormon culture's fault. It's partly the fault of the culture, because it doesn't allow people really even the opportunity to really consider those things with their own shame. They have to carry the shame of the culture on top. So it's really it's almost unapproachable. You know what I'm saying? And I think maybe the same with Chad. Maybe Chad had some slightly violent, really, or even almost like homicidal, fascination. It came out in his books, actually, because indirectly, when he talks about the end of the world and all these people being destroyed, you can see the destroyer is in Chad as well. Okay, but because he's a Mormon, and because the Mormon subculture doesn't even allow you to even approach anything sort of vicious or nasty, all that stuff just gets dissociated into this satellite entity that we have no control over. We lose control because it's not housed in our central personhood. So if any of us could learn from this, it's better to know what you've got, the sort of not nice things about yourself, the nasty things. It's better just to know it and just to feel like crap about it. Okay. Because that feeling like crap, however sick it makes you feel, that is at least a real feeling. And you can only have a feeling if you've got a real soul. You know what I mean? When you get it all satellited out and dissociated, you lose a lot. You lose too much. It's better to have a soul and to keep your soul, and just to feel sick and like shit about things about yourself and just carry that terrible feeling. You're much better off that way than to dissociate it into a satellite where you will not have full control over it. Okay. And don't even mess with it. Don't even play with that, because we can see in these cases, maybe you won't do something as bad as what Lori did, but you may end up doing stupid things anyway. You may end up being too aggressive in a lawsuit, and then you might even lose money. A lot of times when people get gung-ho for a lawsuit, they turn out to lose the money, as plaintiffs. Not everybody wins lawsuits, or you may just do things like you may just get into too many fights at work, when really, if you really just think about it, sometimes it's better just to pick your fights at work and not necessarily get antagonistic with a coworker, even if they're being an asshole. Just deal with it. Sometimes tolerate things. So all of us on a small scale can learn from this. Okay, because I think in Lori's case, like a lot of people, she's got a destroyer in her. But honestly, there's a lot of people that have a destroyer in them, but they've got it integrated. They may even feel like crap about it, maybe subconsciously, but they haven't let it dissociate into such a satellite that then you just become like a fragmented person, and you cannot really, truly, meaningfully manage all those things. And then once the horses are out of the gate and the train's left the station, then you're just on the rampage, and it's really hard to put on the brakes once the rampage has gotten started. And anybody who tries to doubt that, if you ever get in a point where we as ourselves, where we could have our own rampage, and it could be a small scale rampage, like once you start yelling at your wife or you start yelling at one of your children, it's funny how once you start, it's really hard to put the brakes on it. And before that even gets started, sometimes it's better just to admit these things about ourselves, that I might be a destroyer, and just feel like crap about it. And guaranteed, there's no method after that. If you just let yourself feel like crap, it will get integrated somewhat, and you're way better off than letting it become a dissociated aspect. So basically, if I'm going to take Audrey's testimony seriously, okay, I can see in Lori's past that she does have a destroyer, maybe not a killer, but a destroyer. Okay. And I can see that for whatever reason, through dissociation, through fragmentation, that destroyer just kind of got split out into a satellite. And like what happens with a lot of criminals, that satellite part of themselves becomes very unmanageable when they start unleashing and they start getting into serious fights with people. So anyway, thanks for watching and take care.